Welcome to Beyond the Chutes, is presented by Parasite Systems. We're your hosts today, Doug Simcox, Sam Swearingen, of course, two-time North America Rodeo Commission saddle bronc riding champion. Today, Sam and I are riding for the brand, recording together in Taylorsville, Kentucky on a Saturday morning. Sam.
How are you today, Doug?
I am good. You know, we're taking a page out of the Jerry Bellis recording. We're sitting out on the back deck. My friend Tyler built this for us last spring.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Tongue groove, kind of the new style, the big beams, and
yeah,
it's beautiful here.
Yeah, a little windy, but we got our shades down, so if you hear birds in the background, that's perfect. That's exactly what we're working for on this Saturday morning. Sam, last night, PBR event, Louisville, the Yum Center. What'd you think?
They had young bulls, the 2, 3, and 4-year-olds, and they were a little bit hot in all kinds of ways. It was exciting. There was a black bull in there, and oh my goodness, to be that athletic, and it was pretty incredible.
You bet. Young bulls, as you said, and very juicy, as you said. Cowboys had their hands full. They didn't know anything about the bulls, of course, before they got there.
Well, I'm sure they know a little bit,
yeah.
But being young, you never know what they're going to do. It's livestock, and they'll change it up. And I really think that it should be to the Cowboys' advantage, them young ones, if you're sitting square and doing your basics right, because they're not going to change it up like an old bull when they feel you move.
Bet.
But they didn't have too good luck last night. Bucked a lot of guys off.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was electric. Got to see Dalen. He came up and hung out with us. He had a re-ride on his first one. I bucked off the second one, but looks tough, looks good, looks strong, Sam.
Yeah, I almost ran over the person sitting next to me to go down and hit the buzzer because I
He
didn't
did
think
on the
he was.
re-ride. Yeah,
on the first one, I didn't think he was going to hit it.
Yeah,
it'd be like the time at home I'm throwing money at the TV. Hit the button, hit the damn button. But and he never did that time, and that was for $100,000. All he had to do was ride one more. And,
yeah.
They might not give him, but I'll spend $500 to take that chance.
Yeah, for $100,000, probably so. But he came up, sat with us, hung out with us for a bit. We're going to see him again tonight. Again, looks great. Got a brand new haircut. I'm going to get a video of that brand new haircut. And I did post up a picture or two of Dalen onto the Beyond the Chutes Facebook page. And Brinson James. What do you want to say about Brinson James?
Leave me the hell alone.
Well, come on. He only called you out twice in the whole evening. Only twice on the microphone did he say, Sam, you got to clap your hands. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and then he said, if you're too old, just nod your head.
Yeah, and you started nodding your head.
Yeah.
I like that. I did. And then he came up and he gave you a great big old hug and then had you stand up on camera because you're wearing your very nice Western suit jacket, had your blue jeans on, your Wranglers on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Never mind.
Never mind?
Never mind.
Okay. Well, I posted up a video of Brinson on the Beyond the Chutes web page, or on Facebook page, so you got to go check that out. What a hoot. Man, full of energy. He's got more balance than anybody I've ever seen. He can walk the rails of these rodeo arenas.
He's very athletic.
My goodness.
The boy is very athletic.
And, Sam, it's that time of the year. Wheels are turning. Cowboys and cowgirls are out. They're pounding the miles on the highways, hustling from rodeo to rodeo, overnight runs. Remember those days?
Sometimes. I get this old-timers thing.
Do you get this old-timers?
Yeah.
You remember the driving and hanging on because you're so tired and barely keep your eyes open?
Yeah, I remember sleeping a lot.
Yeah.
Now I drive all the time.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate these cowboys, these cowgirls listening to us as they're going down the road. We hope it helps them in these overnight runs, all kinds of weather and traffic. Remind them, be safe, eyes up. We hope this episode will help the miles pass just a bit easier. And again, find us, follow us, like us. You know, the algorithmic gods, they call it, right? That determines how our stuff gets out into the world. And We haven't figured it out. We're just having a lot of fun doing this. But speaking of getting out in the world, go ahead, Sam.
Well, you've been. I only know one God.
No, this was with a small G.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Phew,
This
made
was-
me nervous.
No,
'cause
no,
I'm
no.
having trouble figuring that one out. I don't need more in the picture.
No. Small G, and I apologize for that. The Facebook algorithmic, I don't even know if I'm saying that right. But we've been putting up some reels, Sam. We got a Mike Fletcher reel, 30 seconds long. And before I go any further, I just got to give a huge shout out to Tom Wadrich, Tom, a.k.a. Tom Woods. The pictures he shot, late 70s, early 80s, they are priceless right now. We add them to our reels. Did you see the numbers on the one Mike Fletcher reel about Ricky Lindsay?
No, because I don't want to know because they went ahead of me, and I'm kind of competitive.
Oh, you are kind of competitive. but this reel, Sam, pushing 100,000 watches.
Isn't that incredible?
And I attribute it to three things, okay? These algorithmic, whatever you want to call them, magic,
go.
I'll just call it that. Great voice and the great storytelling of Mike Fletcher. And we got all kinds of episodes up here now with Mike Fletcher on Beyond the Chutes and the pictures of Tom Woods.
Yeah, Mike's a very interesting character, and I love him to death. He's just a great man, and he remembers everything. I don't remember much, but he remembers it all, and he can tell a story like nobody's business.
He does too. And just the right inflections at the right time. Great storyteller. Keeps you connected. And Sam, big weekend this weekend. Marks the 1 year anniversary of
Beyond the Chutes.
a year ago, we sat at my kitchen table. Remember, and we had all kinds of handheld announcer mics, and it was buzzing and ringing, and we were just trying to figure it out back then. But my goodness, it's been a great year.
Yeah, and boy, Doug, you've been spending the money and getting the equipment, and it's going very well. And we haven't put in the 12-hour talks like we did the first week,
Right.
day there, but
Right.
it's been good.
Well, the day is young.
Okay.
This with Lenore today. This is the first of maybe 10 hours. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how it goes. And speaking of anniversaries, did you know this year the Big Hat Rodeo Company celebrates 104 years?
I had no clue. No clue. I've met them in the early 80s going to the rodeos, but I had no clue of their history. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what's going to be said today.
All right, so perfect roll in. Let's welcome to BTC Miss Lenore Calzavera, fourth generation Big Hat Rodeo Company. Lenore, are you there?
I certainly am. And thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it, guys.
It is so cool to have you on. You got a great voice, by the way, for our podcast. We'll put her in reels. That'll move the needle.
Yeah.
We'll put a little competition out there for Mike Fletcher. So Lenore,
One of my favorites.
Okay, perfect. So Lenore, let's get started. 104 years ago, and if my math is right, that means the first year of rodeo was 1920.
Exactly.
An accountant got
Exactly.
math right for a change.
Yeah,
Good job.
I did. Without a calculator.
Yes.
So talk about how it all got started.
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I'm assuming by people listening to my last name, they'll know I'm very Italian. And when my grandparents came from Italy back in the early 1900s, they had a sponsor in the city of Chicago who brought them to the States, and my grandparents settled in a little town about 50 miles northwest of Chicago, which was named Libertyville. And there they raised their family, built a house, and all that kind of stuff. And while they were trying to learn how to speak English and to read English well, a local school teacher handed my grandfather and his 4-year-old son some of the dime Western novels that had been written at the time and were very popular. Well, the family kind of fell in love with those stories, and by the time my uncle was in his early teens, that's Mito, who Sam will probably remember the name, he ran away and went out west and worked on cattle ranchers and learned how to ride and all of that, and just fell in love with the entire experience. Came back home to Libertyville a while later and asked my grandfather if he would help him, and he wanted to put on rodeos. Of course, my grandfather thought he was insane. But while my grandfather had a job in town, he also had draft horses. And those draft horses were used to literally dig out basements under existing buildings and that run down the length of downtown Libertyville even today. And so when my grandfather wasn't looking, Mito would take the draft horses and flank them and take them out and buck them. And he thought that was a lot of fun. So he started gathering livestock from family and friends and farmers in the local area. And pretty soon they had their first rodeo in 1920, right outside of Libertyville on a friend's farm. And the obsession started there, and it hasn't quit.
You know, and it just amazes me. You know, everybody says, how does somebody from New York get into this? But the more we do this, the more I hear that everybody has struggles trying to learn the business. And here's a man from Italy.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
Well, exactly. And the whole story of an Italian farmer, basically, who comes to Chicago, of all places, and becomes a rodeo stock contractor. Really? You know, it sounds like a bad movie. And it really has become this insane love of not only the sport, but of livestock of all kinds. And I think that that's made a huge difference in our lives. And particularly with my dad growing up, Mitos had his first rodeo 8 years before my dad was even born. So by the time my dad came along, by the time he was 8 or 10, he was learning stuff that people today probably don't learn until, you know, they're lucky in their 20s or 30s. And it was an instant connection with horses and bulls and steers and calves and everything. And it has just continued to grow. And I think continued to bring a whole lot of pleasure to all of us.
And your father's name is?
Rudy.
Rudy, okay.
And he's the contractor that Sam would probably remember the most. And he ran Big Hat for his entire life. And basically, he passed in 2015 at 86. And up until the summer before he passed, he was still on the back of those buck and chutes.
Oh, wow.
And the thing that impressed me, yes, Rudy was the backbone of what I knew, and you and your sister were there always working and doing things. And after I heard he passed, I thought, well, how will that continue? And then, is it your nephew?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then your nephew, and he was so young, you know, that's when I was really heavy into the stock contracting business. And I thought, my goodness, this is a big load for a young kid. How is he going to continue? But I never realized that you were still involved because I didn't go to rodeos, you know. So it's very impressive that you're still involved, because it's, you and I know the workload of putting rodeos on. 90%, 99% of the people watching have no clue.
Absolutely. And it's kind of funny because when we were starting, we were kids, we were all trick riding. I was really blessed because I had a rodeo background on both sides. Not only had Dad grown up that way, but my mom's family were very, very well-known trick riders and trick ropers. Her dad was a rodeo clown and specialty acts. And in fact, she was trick riding and doing a high school pony at age 4. And by age 5, her family was performing at Madison Square Garden and, you know, Denver and Burwell and all of those kind of places. And there were 10 of them that trick rode and trick roped. And then my grandfather had a clown act, and he had a jumping horse called Silver Gold, who actually went through a wall of fire. Not like the rings we use today or the slats. He actually had to build a wooden gunny sack covered wall every day and cut a 6-foot by 6-foot hole in it, and that horse went through a wall of fire.
Wow.
And a very cool act. And in fact, her very first trick riding saddle, which is 13 inches long, sits at the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame,
Really?
along with, with some of the outfits and stuff that Nudie the rodeo tailor made and stuff for the family. And their history alone is absolutely fascinating. So when it got combined with my dad's family, most of us really didn't have a choice. I mean, we were going to grow up in rodeo, and I think we were extremely blessed. But from the very beginning, we all had to do, our family was basically the whole crew when we started. I secretary, but we had to ride. We rode jumping horses and acts, and the boys hauled livestock and set up and tear down, and they were pickup men. Dad was the flank man, did all the stock. My mom made all the outfits and stuff. My sister handled all the saddle horses, did the openings. We all rode quadrille. It was nonstop. After you pay off the rodeos, we tear things down and start all over again. So we all had a background in a lot of the areas of rodeo. And Justin, my nephew, was kind of lucky enough to grow up with Grandma and Grandpa with them all the time. And I think that left a very lasting impression. And that kid is he is not only very tough, very knowledgeable, but you couldn't ask for anybody that works any harder than Justin anyway, as well.
And is he the manager then now, Lenore?
He's the chute boss.
Chute
so
boss. Okay.
he still has to put up with his aunt. And so I still run all of the business, and I'm there to turn out every single horse turn out of the chutes. And Justin handles all the setup, all the tear down, all the livestock stuff. But he's got a farm. He's a farrier by trade, and he's also got a farm just over the border. As a matter of fact, he bought Uncle Mito's original farm and rehabbed it, and now has his place there. And so we're all within about 40 minutes of each other, I guess. And I have all the broncs and equipment and everything here at my house, and then we do the schools and stuff like that at his arena. So it's worked out really, really well, and I think we're really blessed. I don't have much help at the farm, but at the rodeos, I have tons of help, and we have a fabulous crew. So we're very, very blessed that way.
Yeah, the crew is the backbone to the whole thing.
Absolutely. I know a lot of cowboys think they could always do that job until they have to do that job. And I think all cowboys should have to set up and tear down an arena once and take entries once, and boy, their lives would change dramatically.
My theory was nothing will make you ride better than setting up and tearing down.
You're right.
and it's in two ways, and I'm serious about this. It's not just the work and the labor that's in it, but if you got 4 or 5 young guys that's tearing down an arena, they're talking rodeo the whole time. And I think that has a lot to do with the mindset when they crawl over the bucking chutes. I can't say why, but I really believe that helps their riding. The one Amish kid that's won the IRA twice, the first rodeo he came and worked with me, he couldn't, sit in a truck. But we got done. He said, "Man, and I'm wore out and tired. Isn't this the greatest thing ever?" Oh, shit. But that's their mindset,
Yeah.
It's great.
In the middle
Exactly.
of it. Yeah. So
By the time, it's probably been 10 years since I wanted to pick up a panel anywhere, I got to tell you that for sure.
Yeah.
And now I don't have a problem when they're tearing down, driving off, and going home. But I used to stay until the very last second, and I guess I finally grew up.
It is hard at first, and then when you think, "Oh man, at least I can get somewhere without being so wore out," you leave.
Exactly.
And which kid do you leave at home, and which one do you send? And with the stock.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Justin does so much of that, and we are really, really blessed because we've got Justin's very best friend in the world is actually one of the guys that has worked for us since he was a teenager. And he's the same guy. He pushes all the cattle at our rodeos, and which is not a glamorous job by any means, but it is hugely important to the timed event guys. And he also has pushed all the cattle at the IFR for years. But he can set up, tear down the arena. He can, work stock, feed, whatever needs to be done. Andrew is always there, and they have become best friends, pals, and so are their families. But I think that's one of the coolest things about rodeos is many times the relationships that you build are not just for a day or a weekend or a rodeo. It's forever. I have rodeo committees that we don't even produce their rodeos anymore, and their families and us are still best friends.
And I don't think it's the coolest. I know it is because that's the one thing I miss. Do I miss everything about the rodeo business? Hell no. But I do miss the relationships. And you still have them, you still have them.
Right. And I think that's one of the really neat parts, Sam, is that almost all of us have those particular relationships that have lasted, good times, bad times, whatever, but those connections still remain. And it doesn't matter if I talk to some of these people once a month or once every 2 years, it still feels like we're right together. And I think that's just an amazing accomplishment for all of rodeo.
Yeah, because you've had to troubleshoot to figure out how to do the best job you can. And so you sat around and you talked and okay, will this work? Will that work? And it just became part of you.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So, and it's funny, even family celebrations, weddings, funerals, birthdays, births, all of that kind of stuff, we're all together for all of those. And they feel as much a part of the Calzavera family as they probably feel of us being in their families. And so that's very important, and it still remains a really big factor in our lives.
And one of the things I did that I don't think many other stock contracting companies do or did, I used to have a meeting once a year where I invite all the committees together and sit down. Okay, they wanted to keep them apart because they charged last year or did something here, but I want them to get together and sit down and what worked was good, but what didn't work, so that the other person wouldn't make the same mistake. And then they got to know each other and got to be friends, and they'd go watch each other's rodeos, and it was really nice, really nice.
I think it's a great idea, and I think those roundtable type discussions are so important for all of us, because I think our job as stock contractors and producers is every bit as much making sure that the rodeos we produce, whether they're host committee rodeos or we're self-producing rodeos, that they're as successful, not only financially, which of course is, but that they're successful as far as production goes and as far as growth goes, that you're looking to expand contestants and bonuses and all of the other things that make our sport different and special are important. And I think the contractors that kind of come and go and don't either understand that or know how to put it in practice fail all of us. And I think those are the things that hurt rodeo more than anything. Bad performance, bad rodeos hurt everybody. Good rodeos help everybody. So if we could work better with just like the things you just suggested, I think that's a terrific thing for everybody in rodeo.
Yeah, it seemed to be, it built more than anything relationships.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Always comes
Absolutely.
back to that.
And we
doesn't it?
live and die by those relationships still today. We really
bet.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lenore, I want to ask a question. You talked about your mom's family, and I'm going to take you back just for a moment, and I apologize for this, but I can't go by this. Your mom's saddle is is on display at the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame in Colorado Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And what are their names? Who are these folks?
It was the Graham family. It's the Graham Western Riders is what they were called. They're originally from Kansas. And again, there were 10 kids. So as they grew, they started trick riding by the time they were 3. They all trick roped, and they would move up in ponies. So they actually traveled around the country, and they had a semi and a big, looked like a school bus. And there were my grandfather and grandma and 10 kids, a tutor, and a guy that was a hired hand. So my grandmother would feed everybody every day. The kids had classes every day and had to continue their homework. And then there were practices and performances. And, my grandmother had a sewing machine right on the truck. So they did all of that. There are some fabulous pictures of like the Clydesdale from Budweiser. They were at one of the rodeos with them. And there's all 10 kids sitting from this horse's ears all the way back to the tail. And some of the pictures and stuff, then a lot of them were lost in a fire, but I've still got several. And some of those things, the places that they played and the people that they met, the Burwell, Nebraska rodeo came out with I think it was a 50th or 100th anniversary book. And there's a picture in there of my mom at the age of 4 on a high school pony with that particular trick riding saddle.
Oh, wow.
And then there's a picture of her at age 5 in Madison Square Garden on a different pony, but she's standing next to a woman that had the biggest horse at the Madison Square Garden livestock show that year. And so there's just all kinds of those little moments that we can never get back.
Yeah.
But the photos and the stories and the stuff that went with them are amazing. And my grandfather was a tremendously talented horseman. And of course, I never got to see him perform, but some of the photos and the things that were passed down on his acts were amazing. I would love to be able to do an act like he had with his jumping horse, but I don't think there's a building in the world that would let us put one of those walls inside. I mean, we'd
The
build out,
wall of
we'd bring
fire.
down the building.
The wall of fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, things like that. And had a great comedy mule act and things like that. But all the kids were terrific trick ropers and trick riders. And they just kept moving, as they grew. The ponies and the horses that they rode changed and their saddles changed and stuff like that. My mom got a trick riding saddle for her 12th birthday. It was a, more adult-sized saddle. And it's the one she rode until she quit. And it's the one I rode throughout my entire career. And it still sits in my family room.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
so there's a lot of that left.
A lot of that left.
now you said your grandfather was a great horseman. Now, with the 10 kids, how did he find the time?
You're not the first person that's asked that question. I got to admit. And I don't know how my grandmother managed to feed 10, 12, 14 people every day on the road from a bus.
Yeah. And
when they went home to the ranch, she had to do the same thing 7 days a week.
Yeah. What were the ages of the 10 children? How young to how old, or spreads or whatever?
Well, let's see. When my mom was there was probably about a 20-year spread between the oldest and the youngest.
Yep.
And so as the youngest were starting to perform, a couple of the oldest ones, the oldest girl had gotten married, come back and still rode for quite a few years.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then the oldest boy went to the service and returned. And in fact, when my grandfather died, my mom was 12, and I guess the whole crew didn't know what they were going to do, and they kept performing for about another 8 or 10 years. And in that time, my mom and 3 or 4 of her brothers performed quite a bit throughout the country, and Mito hired them to come work at a rodeo to trick ride and trick rope for his rodeos one summer, and that's how my mom and dad met.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, was this during the 50s, the 60s? When they were going hard?
They met in the 40s.
They met in the 40s?
Yeah, they met. Yeah. And my parents got married in 1950.
Okay.
And Mom trick rode up until she had 4 kids in 4 years, starting in like 1952. But she came back and trick rode and trick roped for quite a while after that. And it was probably like 1960 when she quit completely.
Okay, so the Graham family riders, did I get that right?
Graham Western Riders. Right?
Graham Western Riders. So they were performing in the 20s, 30s, 40s during the Depression out on the road?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. And that was one of the interesting parts of some of the stories that my grandmother would tell us, is that a lot of times they would get to a fair or whatever, and, they weren't able to get paid. So they were paid a lot of times in food and in horse feed and, stuff like that. And the committees would give them what they could from the gate. But remember, gates were pennies at the time. So, but they survived through that whole thing. And one of the ways they said was the most important to them is that between rodeos, there was always a local farmer somewhere, always, that would take all of their horses, all of the kids, all the family, and bring them out and put them up until they were ready to go to the next place.
Oh, wow.
And some of the contracts and things that we still had copies of are amazing. Just the distances they traveled and the places they went were, would be astounding today.
Yeah, the contracts, that's incredible if you have them. And I've got a file of them at home, but you don't think of it. But North Washington, Pennsylvania, the rodeo's been going on probably 60 years. And in their hall, we got a copy of the first contract, and it was for $1,200 plus half the gate.
Oh,
and
wow.
the ticket prices were like 50 cents or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that. So
yeah,
it was amazing to see, all handwritten. Wasn't none of this mumbo jumbo like we got today.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
Pretty simple
Absolutely.
contracts.
Yeah.
Very, very, very specific, but
Yeah.
pretty simple. So,
Well, and Sam, you'll remember the Grays Lake, Illinois rodeo because you were there and Mike was there many, many years. But when that rodeo first started, which is probably 90 years ago now, they had no money. They had no seats. They didn't have everything. Mito brought everything to the arena, and the contract was handwritten, like you said. And I think it was for 2000 then, but that included all the seats and everything, and all the help, all the livestock and everything. And we had that rodeo without a contract. That was the only time they had a contract until the 1970s. And then one of the presidents of the group at that time called my dad and I and asked us to come to his house. And it turned out he was sick and he was worried about the future of the fair and of the rodeo. So he hand wrote a 5-year contract so that the fair wouldn't have to worry about it and we wouldn't have to worry about it for the next 5 years. And he did live another year or two, but it was an amazing gesture. And I think it shows perfectly the commitment of people that have done rodeos and fairs and things like that for all these years, and how much we actually owe their foresight, because we probably wouldn't have ever thought of that. And I think we did that rodeo for over 75 years.
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's incredible. And talking to North Washington, they were the first ones that came to me and wanted a multi-year contract. They wanted 4 years. They said, and this is after the first one I did. And I said, sure. And then it got me thinking. Then I started doing 3-year contracts with most everybody, because then you knew where you're going to be and what was going on. And it just made business sense. And
Absolutely. And it is absolutely the only way to go. It really, really is, especially in a economy that's so weird and so up and down. You really need that consistency and the stability to be able to make plans long term.
yeah, when fuel prices went from $2 to $5 a gallon there a few years ago, you had to swallow hard, not just on the road, but mostly the farming, doing the hay and everything I did. When you filled them tractors up, went crazy. So
Fixed pricing
when that
on your
whole thing-
contracts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when our rodeo committees found out about all the fuel mess, they actually got together and created a fuel clause for our contract.
Oh, wow.
I said, I don't want to have to charge you, because they were saying we are going to have $5 fuel and all of that. And I don't want to charge you $5 a gallon for fuel now when we might not need that. And so they said, what if we put on a thing that you figure the fuel at whatever you're going to figure at it this year. And if it goes more than that, we pay you. If it's less than that, you pay us. And it's been there ever since.
Oh, wow.
good idea.
Good idea. Yeah. And back
Yeah,
to those
and
relationships,
that came from
right?
them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You bet. You bet. So the Grand Western Riders, this is intriguing to me, and I'm sorry to keep coming back to this.
Oh, no.
But you mentioned Burwell, Nebraska. You mentioned Madison Square Garden. So coast to coast in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s is what I'm hearing? Coast to coast?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they had their home base in a little town called Salina, Kansas.
Oh, yeah.
And after my grandfather died, one of the kids had settled in Texas. And so grandma moved down there and they moved the farm down there. But basically for most of those years, they were in Kansas and then went whichever way. They were at the Chicago International Livestock Show, which is like the big society show, like at Madison Square Garden, for 17 years in a row.
Wow. Wow. And,
Yeah.
and
So things like that.
when you say your grandfather was a comedy actor, so like a barrelman, was it rodeo and Wild West shows at the time?
Yeah, and there were a lot of Wild West shows still going on at that time. They worked for a long time in Chicago. There's a radio station called WGN, and back in the heyday of radio, they took their show on the road. And so they performed with them a lot, and that was kind of more of a Wild West show. And then at the rodeos, he would perform just like a regular barrelman, right?
So bullfighter and funny man back in the day?
I don't think he ever fought bulls. At least I've never heard a story about that.
Okay.
So I believe he was just a barrelman. Not that that's not enough, but then he had this specialty acts as well.
Sure. And in 1950, your mom and your dad get married. So now take us to you and growing up. Step us through early memories all the way up through.
You must have been born about 78, 79, Lenore?
Oh, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, now, we grew up in Libertyville, and just outside of town, and we're on the north shore of Chicago, which was like the elite area at the time. But it was kind of funny because we really weren't. I mean, we were good farmers and rodeo people. But Adley Stevenson, who ran for president and stuff,
Yep.
had his farm right across the street from us. I taught his grandchildren how to ride. And then we had, if you walk into a restaurant and you see the milk machines that are stainless steel that say Norris across the front, Norris Farms was right down the street from us and was right off the Des Plaines River. And we had a huge riding stable and boarding stable there. And that's still an actual stable today, but it's now owned by the Forest Preserve for the state of Illinois. And so that's how we grew up. All went to Catholic school in town. We had horses all the time. My dad would go out west and bring back a semi-load of horses every spring off of a friend's ranch. And the four of us and my dad would go to riding, and we'd break 20, 25 horses and start selling them all over the place. And it was a very popular stable. My dad was a great guy to work with, number one. Always made sure the horses were broke well. And us kids spent our summers escorting rides out. So we would have anywhere from 5 riders to 25 riders at a time. There were always between 50 and 80 horses on the place. And we grew up, as far as I'm concerned, with the best childhood you could ever have asked for. Mm-hmm. We worked hard, but we played hard. And we had a great family connection, Sunday dinners at my grandma's house in Libertyville, and rodeos. So there were always cowboys stopping in. And so we just grew up with them around us all the time.
And it's funny, I kind of grew up on kind of the same scenario, not a great big riding stable. We always did trail rides when I was kids, and we'd had about 40 horses around, but I really didn't care for it because I got bored. You wanted to do something more. So, yeah, taking out trail rides was not my cup of tea.
Yeah, we found out that we could create enough havoc when my parents weren't looking that we had a blast. Like, there was a very old dam across the Des Plaines River, full of holes. And Mom and Dad got curious when we were all getting up. I mean, we're always up like 6 o'clock in the morning, but at 5 o'clock, the four of us are out and on horses, and we're gone. And we come back, and the horses are always wet, and we're wet. So my dad followed us one morning down to the river, and we didn't see him. He was on his horse and way behind us. And so he saw us, and we were loping these horses across this dam that was full of holes and jumping them off into the river. That didn't go over very well. So he waited until we all got out of the river and back up on the shore. And for the first time and only time that I can remember, my dad spanked all four of us.
Oh, wow.
The only time can I ever remember him raising a hand to us. And then he said, if you guys tell your mother, that's not even going to be the start. So, Mom, I don't know that Mom ever knew what we were doing, but my dad made sure we knew that was not an acceptable thing to do.
Probably
but
not the only time
create some havoc.
Needed to spank you, but the only time he did it. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, he was really the laid back, easygoing dad. My mom was certainly much more disciplinarian than that, and she never spanked us, but Dad was the softie, and so that was, I think we just scared him to death.
Oh, I can imagine. Daredevils.
Well, we were pretty much brats, I have to admit, but we worked hard.
Yeah. So what's your earliest memories of working in the rodeo, with the rodeo, performing, competing?
Yep. We all started pretty early. I think I secretaried the first rodeo. I think I was 15.
Oh, wow.
It was one of Mito's rodeos. And we were all trick riding in rodeos by then. And my brother, Frank, who is Justin's dad, and my sister Leanne and I trick rode together for a long time. And we all four of us, including my brother Cody, the oldest one, we also all rode quadrille and stuff like that. So by the time we were teenagers, we were all in.
And trick riding just for your family's rodeo? Were you traveling a bit with that?
No, actually, and it was kind of funny because we had people ask us all the time about trick riding at other rodeos, but we all had so much stuff going on at home. I think we trick rode a couple different events that weren't my parents' rodeos, but very few.
Yeah.
We otherwise, and we had years where we had 20 rodeos. So we were busy enough just with theirs that I don't think any of us felt compelled to perform outside. After Frank got married, he and his wife they used one of our horses, and it was called Frank Calzavera and Cat Dancer, and great jumping horse. She would jump fire and stuff like that, but she also jumped cars. And so he went to the IFR with that act, and they trick rode together at some rodeos that weren't our rodeos.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you mentioned quadrille. Did I get that right?
Quadrille.
Describe what that is, if you would, Lenore.
Quadrille is square dancing on horseback. And basically you have 4 couples or 8 people that do exactly what you do if you square dance on the ground, except you're riding horses. And we moved. I mean, we didn't slow down at all. I think quadrille is one of those things that if you're going to do it and do it well, it has to be done really fast. And so the horses, when they're cutting in and out under other horses and stuff like that to make those moves, horses really have to know what they're doing, and the group as a whole has to really be together. So we had 8 people that worked together all the time. It was the 4 of us kids and then some friends and other family members, and it was great. If you could get a group together today, quadrille would be the coolest thing to do. But trying to keep 8 people together all the time and have time to practice and stuff like that is literally really, really a tough job today.
And a bit dangerous, to your point.
Well, it's you have to run. I mean, You're moving and
quarters,
and
right?
You've got very close quarters, and you've got to make sure that those horses are on point all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We were blessed, though. My dad could find $50 horses and make them into stars, and I can't tell you how many times we came up with horses that did awesome work, but they weren't, $4,000 or $5,000 horses. They were stuff he would find out and about, and he was one heck of a horseman. So if there was a way to make one work, he figured it out.
That is very neat. And trick riding, I do believe, Lenore, you're the first trick rider that we've had on our show. So for our listeners, talk a little bit about some of the different tricks that you would do, and maybe describe them. So give them a name and maybe describe them, if you would, please.
So there's a wide variety of tricks, and there are some wonderful trick riders today. As a matter of fact, this year 2 of our guests, entertainers, will be Dusty Crane Dickerson, and who is a fabulous trick rider and Roman rider, and then Bert Davis will be joining us on the clown end quite a bit. But trick riding is one of those things that the horse is so much more hugely important than what you think, because the horse has got to have a great stride, they've got to be dependable, strong, and they've got to be able to not only understand but deal with somebody hanging off their tails or hanging off their sides or being up in the air and literally not having any control of them at the time. So at the beginning, most of the trick riders were running up and down throughout the arenas instead of around in the circle the way they do today. But basically, the classic trick riding pose is probably the most commonly known, and that's the hippodrome stand. Basically, your feet are in a strap that's just behind the saddle horn, and you stand up, lean out over the horse's neck, and you're not holding on to anything. There's what's called the death drag, which is you have one leg in a strap on the right side of the horse, lay over the saddle, and your head is down towards the ground, and hands down. Usually you can hit the ground with your hands when you're dragging that way. And again, the horse is running full speed at all of these. There's a tail drag, which your feet are in 2 straps on the back of the saddle, and you lay back over the horse's tail and hands down, towards the ground at that area, at that level. And there's a lot of different ones. I think the 1 foot stand is very popular. Again, you've got 1 foot in a strap that's on the side of the saddle, but up towards the saddle horn. You grab a hold of the horse's mane up by its ears, pull yourself up, and then you've got your free foot up in the air. They've got a lot of different options and things that have changed on those tricks. They call it a 1 foot stand where you don't hold on at all, a butterfly. So there's a lot of different tricks, and some of them look really hard and aren't, and some of the ones that look like they're going to be the easiest ones are some of the toughest ones to do. Yeah. They take a lot of core strength, and the working between the horse and the rider is everything.
And horsemanship skills. I mean, you got to be a good rider first, don't you, to do this? This is...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big important. Yeah, and I think it's like almost every other sport, though. It's like barrel racing. Okay, there are a lot of girls that come into barrel racing and buy a great horse, but if they can't ride that horse, they're still not going to win. Mm-hmm. And in most cases, they're not going to stay on. You know, we watched throughout the years a lot of families buy girls great horses, but if the girls weren't ready for that horse, that matchup didn't work. And I think that's one of the reasons in almost every rodeo event that the animals we use, they have to be every bit as athletic, if not more so, than the contestants and the riders.
And you said you've got Dusty Crane Dickerson this year.
Mm-hmm. She's been joining us a couple rodeos for the last, I think this is the third year. And she's, born and raised in Illinois. And her two brothers also work with us, and she is an absolute asset at every level and a great person to work with.
You bet. And we worked with her quite a bit. She'd been to Benton and Attica and all these places, and just what a wonderful person. And she was at the NFR this year.
Again.
And I will stand up when she pulls them to a stop at the very end and gets ready to do that backflip off of the horses. It's just phenomenal. But what a talent. You talk about balance and core strength and all that. She's a master.
Yeah, she's a rock star. And I think one of the cool things is for us, we probably would not have been able to have her with us as much as we have lately if it weren't for the fact that, she's got two absolutely adorable kids. Mm-hmm. And she's trying to stay closer to home, and our rodeo certainly fit that for her. So it's been very cool to be able to have her and her brothers join us.
Yes, and a lot of people don't know, but her background is in gymnastics. And she was, I think...
It's funny, I met her when she was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And her dad brought her into one of our rooms at a convention, and Dad and I got to meet her, and... she was like a little adult. She walked in and shook hands and said, hello, how do you do, and all of that. And she was certainly dressed the part, had a lot of pictures and stuff that they were starting to put together for her acts, and just a sweet little girl. And her dad, you could tell, was so very, very proud of this girl. So now that her and Justin are married and with a family, Justin has been able to join us trick riding with Dusty at some of the events too. And they're just a great, great family group to have.
Yeah, good people. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, like my wife's story with trick riding, she trick rode at the IFR. Mm-hmm. And when she first got the job at Longhorn, her sister Loretta, which is an amazing trick rider, they put her on this horse, and Carrie, she said, I can't do it. And Loretta said, let me show you how to do it. And she said, oh, it's the horse.
Yeah.
So.
And it does, I mean, I got to imagine it's got to be everything. Just got to be perfectly matched and balanced. And your mother taught you then, Lenore, to trick ride?
Yes.
And
yes, she did.
Are you still trick riding? Are you helping others learn to trick ride at this point?
No, I'm not trick riding anymore. I'm trying to remember exactly when, but all three of us, as I said, my brother and sister and I trick rode together, and almost simultaneously, Leanne got hurt, a pretty bad back injury, so she couldn't trick ride, and my brother lost his current horse. He'd gone through a couple of them. I had the same horse the entire time I trick rode, and he was the ugliest animal on the planet, but his name was Crusader Rabbit. He was white, which did not endear him to me either. And he had ears that had no cartilage in them, so they couldn't stand up. So his ears laid out flat to the side. And when I would put the blinkers on him, his ears would actually go forward and back, side, and they're laying on the side. So it was always a joke about what a pain in the butt Crusader was. But you could not ask for a smoother stride, faster running, just rock star of a trick riding horse. So that's when we quit. But my brother Frank actually does give trick riding lessons and stuff now at his place. He lives about 10 minutes from Justin, just north of the Illinois-Wisconsin border. And so he has some students that he's worked with quite a bit.
Wow. And that is so cool to give back like he's doing and help these youngsters as they come up through. There's a young lady that we know of up around the Attica area called Riley Jane Mintier. I don't think she's maybe 13 or something like that.
Yeah, around that age.
And she's just now starting to break out. So you might want to put her on your list maybe in another few years there.
Well, it's funny because this spring so far I've heard about 3 youngsters from different parts of the country that are really making a name for themselves pretty young. Mm-hmm. I think the oldest one is 16.
Yeah.
So I think it's wonderful to see some young blood coming in, especially in contract acts, because I think it's been kind of a dry spell with a few notable exceptions like Dusty. But I found that a lot of contractors have stopped hiring, they've got a clown, quote unquote, but they, in a lot of cases, don't have any specialty acts, any dress acts or anything like that. And so it's wonderful when we can support some younger people and bring them in and get a variety of acts back. Not just Roman riding and trick riding, but trick roping. Paxton Rodriguez is a great example of that. And, there's several other ones that are starting to bring bigger acts and create new acts and try not to just live off of redoing old stuff over and over again.
Mm-hmm. And, youth, it's kind of amazing. Around us, there is 5 or 6 young girls, from 12 to 18 that are now trick riding. And it's just like, I look at the Canadian bronc riders, how they've pushed each other and built themselves. There's 8 of those guys up there that ride as good as anybody walking. Yeah. And the trick riding around us, there was, like she said, a dry spell. There was 20 years where there was nobody new coming out.
Yep.
And now it's like a herd of them, and they push each other, and they're going to make each other better.
That is so cool.
I think that is like one of the coolest things. And for a long time, I think we were truly blessed, but think of some of the acts and people that we worked with all the time, Liesl Harris and Toad Cook, Phil Gardenhire, all worked with us, and George Taylor, Jerry Bellis, The Rose, Chris Pyle, Dusty Myers. Those guys have all been such an inspiration that I think a lot of them actually taught some younger people, brought some people on, and I think some of those now are doing the same thing to the younger group today. And, when you have people like Keith Isley or the McEnanys and stuff like that traveling, it's a huge inspiration to anybody that has any interest in that kind of life.
Yeah, and we spoke with Jerry Bellis this week. We went down and sat with him, and just so cool to catch up and hear the stories, very similar to what you're recounting. And he talked about Keith Isley and Liesl Harris, and we're going to learn more about Liesl. He's such an interesting person. We're going to learn a lot more about him on our show here over the next month or two.
He was a fascinating man in a lot of ways, but I think one of the coolest things is he had no problem with trying to help young people get started, and not everybody had that same mindset.
Right.
And I think that he was just an inspiration to very many, many people. I think Dusty Myers would tell you he was probably one of his biggest influences.
Oh, that is so neat. And to your point, it's these guys and gals that are out there performing and, the contract acts and such, this is their livelihood. So it can be easy to fall into anybody that does what I do is a competitor. So to have somebody that can step up and say, no, yes, we do compete, but to Sam's point, by me teaching you, I probably get better in the process. As the teacher teaches, they learn. So, and that's so cool when they can give back like that and not fall into that competitive mindset.
Absolutely. I don't think that there's a day goes by that I don't absolutely enjoy learning something new. I go to a rodeo and maybe I've learned something. I'll watch somebody's production and go, okay, that is one thing we don't ever want to do. And then at the other thing, I thought, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there is such a variance in what you can learn every day that I think when we stop doing that, that's when we're in trouble.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And we stop learning, yeah, then you bet. I agree with that. And I don't know why this sticks in my brain, but Crusader Rabbit, no cartridge in his ears, cartilage, I should say, no cartilage in his ears. How did that occur? I
have no clue.
Oh my goodness,
no clue. We bought him in the early '70s. My parents bought out a rodeo company in Kentucky that was Tommy Horner's rodeo company, and he had kind of a nice looking white horse that they used for carrying the flag and stuff like that, and they had some really nice broncs and some good bulls and all of that, and then they had this horse that I have no idea where he came from. He was just plain ugly, and it's funny because we were trying to find a job for him and we couldn't find anything that he could do, and so we tried trick riding on him, and it did not work.
Yeah.
So my dad slapped a pair of blinkers on him, and he ran as straight and hard as if he had been born to do it. And I thought, dang, now I'm stuck with him.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
Yeah, 20 years later,
Yeah.
you know, I finally lost him. But it was just an amazing kind of story. That rodeo company, when we bought it out, we got some great horses. And Sam, you remember Sarah. She was a baby when we bought that company, and Tommy had named her after his wife.
Oh.
And we brought Sarah home as a foal, and she was amazing. So, you know, went to the finals several times, finals bareback horse of the year several times, and, you know, one of the foundations, I think, of what started our reputation with broncs.
Very, very cowboy friendly. They'd love to get on her.
Yeah.
Loved her.
And funny horse, because she never wanted to really be touched, you know, like if you want, but she would be the first one on that truck every single time. You know, she would run other horses over to get on the truck first. And big, strong, stout mare, and just a delight to have around all those years. And one heck of a bareback horse.
Now, I went to quite a few of your rodeos, but the one horse that sticks out in my mind I never got on, was Desperado, number 8.
Really?
Never did I straddle him, and I wanted to so bad. So bad.
Desperado was Mr. Cool. Big Grula,
Beautiful
workhorse, drafty looking horse. And he literally, we got him off of a guy's farm, and he used him as a draft horse.
Wow.
Had never been broke. And he was just the most honest, easy to get along with horse. He could gain weight looking at a hay bale a mile away.
I love it.
But yeah,
Looks like me at the dinner table.
But he was such a cool horse, and he went to the IFR several times, and we've got some great pictures of Desperado. And as a matter of fact, we got a horse last year who we call Chicken Fuzz, and it's funny, he looks so much, he looks so much like Desperado, you would almost swear, although he's just got a star on his face instead of the blaze that Desperado had. But basically, you could match them up and they'd look like the exact same horse.
Yeah,
funny. There were a lot of great horses from that era, though. You know, Paycheck and Sergeant Pepper, and I'm trying to think, Marie Laveau, High Heels. All of those were horses that had great careers. You know, not only in the IPRA, but they, you know, went to the IFRs and all of that kind of stuff. But just, you know, some of them were more rider friendly than others. But they were a lot of award winners and really cool horses. You'll remember Sundowner,
Yep.
And very small for a bronc. He never weighed more than 1,000 pounds, and we could buck him anywhere. One of the last rodeos we took him to, he was 31 years old. Justin Rowe got him, and Justin looked at me and he says, "Lenore, you've got to retire him. The horse is older than I am." I said, "Okay." Well, maybe this will have to be his last trip then, Justin. We'll see how it goes. It was at Woodstock, Illinois, and he bucked Justin off.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so Justin came back and looked at me and he goes, well, maybe he's got a little life left. I said, okay. And the horse finally, we took him 2 more years to the IFR, and then he had a stroke when he was just short of his 36th birthday.
Oh, wow.
But cool, amazing, amazing horse, and a tiny guy. He was never, one of the big stout horses that we usually haul, but has left a lasting impression. I have my favorite picture of him. I'm staring at it right now in the office. He is one of those that people will always remember. As a matter of fact, we were at a dinner not long ago, and Frank told me that was his all-time favorite horse.
Is that right? Okay. Well, yeah. we need pictures, Lenore, so make sure that you send us lots and lots and lots and lots of pictures, okay?
Yeah, I never run out of pictures.
Okay,
ever.
That's perfect. And in 1981, you had Saddle Bronc of the Year, the International Professional Rodeo Association pick.
Yep.
Tell us about that bronc.
Pick was an interesting case because he was not a horse we raised or anything. He came from a gentleman by the name of Pick Streeter, who Sam remembers the New Windsor Rodeo well, but one of the original streeters at that rodeo had Pick, and he said, Rudy, I can't break him. I can't get him to do anything. Come take him. So we did, and he was unrideable for a year. Have some fabulous pictures of him, and unanimously voted in as the Bronc of the Year. That was great, but after that year, he was done.
Really?
He just didn't want to buck.
Really?
And it was amazing for as treacherous as he was that year. He just quit. So I think we probably took him to 2 rodeos maybe that next year, and we bucked him at the house a lot, but there was no buck left in him at all.
Really?
He just had decided he was quit, so he was done.
Okay.
But a really, really good horse for that year. But I think it just goes to prove that there's really no way to tell how one is going to, I don't care how they're bred or whatever, there is no guarantee of what they're going to be or how long it'll last.
And not only that, it goes to show you can't make them buck. People says, well, how do you train them to buck? You don't train them to buck. They have to want to do it. It's got to be in them. You can help them. You can enhance it and make patterns, but you can't train them to buck.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And
wish you could.
I find that still one of the me too. I think that's still one of the funniest questions. And people look at you like you're crazy when you say, if they don't want to do it, I don't care what you do to them.
Yeah.
They're not going to buck.
Yeah.
And it's the same way, with if there's horses that don't want to get broke, I don't care what you do to them, you're not going to get them broke. And there is such a difference with horses than other animals in that respect. Dogs can be trained and, a lot of other animals can be, but horses, they, you can train them in different aspects or disciplines if they want to.
Yeah.
But if they don't want to, it ain't happening.
Yeah. And then in 2016, you had the Bareback Bronc of the Year, IPRA, Mafia
Well, in between
Witch.
there, her grandmother.
Oh, okay.
I think in between that, Miss Rodeo. I'm trying to think. Miss Rodeo was a colt that was born at our place.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny because we happened to be at a rodeo when she was born, and she was born on my birthday. We were at Monticello, Illinois, I think, when she was born, and big, strong filly. Instantly, you could tell she was going to be huge. By the time she was just over 2, she weighed 1,000 pounds, and we were bucking her in the bareback riding for the first time that year. And we just put a kid on her and thought, well, this is, we'll see what happens. And you knew from day one, we had an up-and-coming star. She was just amazing. She got up to be about 1,250 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And by the time she was 5, she had won the IPRA Bronc of the Year. And we kept her until, I think, like 2012 or something like that. Sold her, and she went to the NFR the next 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, great mare. And her granddaughter is actually the Mafia Witch, which won the 2000 Bareback Horse of the Year. And she has a colt by the name of Capone, who is just a really, really great saddle bronc. He's worth his weight in gold.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, who did you sell Miss Rodeo to?
She went to Classic.
Okay. He
Yeah.
he came back and bought quite a few IPRA horses. And,
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny because we've had several colts that were born and raised on our place that went to the NFR over the years. They didn't all keep the same names or brands or anything like that, but they've presented themselves very well. So we've been proud of that and proud of the fact that for the most part, we've been breeding broncs now for 75 years. So, Mito did a great job with it. My dad did a great job. I think we've been blessed with some horses that have just been tremendous. I think my all-time favorite horse was a big bay gelding by the name of Constant Chaos, and his brand was Odd 8, came from one of our mares and studs, and we bucked him in the bareback riding and in the bronc riding. He went to the IFR in both events, and he bucked off everybody. And he was much more cowboy friendly in the bareback riding, but if you got him in the bronc riding, he would turn back so hard that he would literally throw people out of the arena.
Oh, wow.
But to this day, my all-time favorite horse.
You bet.
We lost him to Collett in like 2015 or 2016, I think. But just a tremendous, tremendous horse. And out of that same mare, I think we've got 7 or 8 broncs that have been just great, great broncs.
And speaking of your breeding program, you register them. Are
Yes.
they registered? Okay. And that's
Yeah.
something
Some are.
that's something I just learned, that there's actually a registry out there. I didn't know that before. And you've been breeding your own broncs for 75 years. So there's a lot of planning
I have not been
involved.
around all that time.
No, I didn't mean you.
Just want to make sure, Doug, that you understand. I haven't been around for all of that.
Not all of it, but Big Hat, I have a breeding program, and that's one of the things that I think some of our listeners may not understand, the Born to Buck programs, as opposed to, are we lucky enough to get something from a riding stable that nobody can ride? And just how much effort and how much time you guys put into the study of the genetics, and not all of them buck, right? So talk a little bit
Absolutely.
about how you approach your breeding program.
Well, and things have changed over the last couple of years, but I think one of the things that's most important to us is that I've always believed our mares were the primary focus of our breeding programs, because we've had a variety of studs over the years, and it didn't matter. Most of those foundation mares, it didn't matter what we bred them to, they threw buckers. Mm-hmm. And I still think that. I mean, the Witch, and I've got 6 or 7 mares out here that I would love to be able to breed all the time. And we're trying to decide what to do right now, because I haven't bred anything for a couple of years, and we're trying to find out if we should go to AI out here. It's really hard for me to keep a stud here. Mm-hmm. And we had one at Justin's place for quite a while, but I just think that it's become, you have to wait 3 or 4 years to find out if you've actually got what you think you have. It's more expensive all the time. For the first time, and I can't even remember how many years, I actually bought 6 broncs last year.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And for me, that was like choking, because we've always had more than enough horses. But we are getting a few more bronc riders than we are bareback riders. So it was kind of interesting. And so that's why we went out and found some more horses. And as a matter of fact, some of them are going to get bucked for the first time at this bronc riding school next weekend.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
So
okay.
I have great hopes for, some of them have already been bucked quite a bit. But as a matter of fact, one of the horses we bought bucked off Cody Gertzen and Cody Reinhardt at the exact same rodeo last year.
Wow. Okay. That's a bronc then.
Yeah, and he came from a friend, that had bought him for a totally different reason, and it didn't work. So we've had, and then Chicken Fuzz, we bought him out at the IFR sale, and he has done a great, great job. Just a really cool horse. So I think that I'm very hopeful for this next 4 that come in, and then we're going to kind of revisit whether we want to start AI in horses or what we're going to do for the next few years.
Okay.
But
and
there'll be a plan made.
Yeah, is there quite a lot of availability out there on the AI side? You can buy the straws, and you have lots of options.
Well, I think there's a lot of options that way. And then you can also go and rent a stud or buy a stud, short term. And there's a lot of people that lease out their studs. My biggest issue is I bought a new place 4 years ago that's set up perfectly for horses, but I literally do all of the stuff here by myself for the most part. And I don't really want a stud here.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to put some money in the place as far as different pens and stuff. And I'm not sure I really want to go to that extent yet, but Justin's place is set up better for that. But it's smaller. So, you kind of have to balance things off a little bit. But I think that there are a lot of availability for straws. There's a lot of really good studs out there. I mean, they're great horses. The problem here is finding vets that are well versed with AI.
Okay.
For
And just we don't have a lot of, horse vets around here are becoming few and far between to begin with, but having ones that have the capability and the facilities and everything for AI are not very common around here.
Yeah, for horses, it's difficult to AI them. It's not the same as cattle.
Yeah.
So.
Big difference in terms of cost and equipment and, checkups and all the other things that go into it. It's a lot more complicated. And so to try to find the right vet, we've been looking for a couple of years, and I haven't found one that's anywhere near us that's close enough to actually make it work.
What percentage are buckers of what you raise? What percentage? I mean, it's just pointing towards the economics of rodeo, that not every horse not every colt or filly that you drop is going to be a bucker.
Well, I got to tell you, we are extremely proud of this, but we're running about 92.5%.
Wow.
Yeah, so we get one or two, out of every batch that don't, but for the most part, they're buckers.
Wow.
And we, for some reason or other, we have thrown a lot more that seem to buck in the bronc riding more than the bareback riding. But then we've got 5 or 6 mares that every horse they've thrown has been a great bareback horse. Yeah. So the witch, she is definitely a great bareback horse, but her colt is a phenomenal bronc. And he is built much more like the grandma than the witch is. So we have, we've been blessed with all of that. So that's why I'd kind of like to continue it and make sure that those bloodlines continue on, but trying to get the right matches right now is where I think most of the problem is, or at least the opportunity to figure it out is going to take some time.
Yeah. And for our listeners, you think, okay, you're raising a colt. When you got 25 mares, then you got 25 colts a year, then you have for the year before 25 colts, and you got 100 heads standing around before you can start them.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money tied up into raising these.
You bet.
A lot of money.
Well, to just figure the feed bills, for one, we can't grow our own hay here. There's not enough room or grain. And the feed bills every year are astronomical, and especially with the cost of hay so much the last couple of years has gone up so badly, and the same thing with grain, and you've got to feed them correctly for them to be able to perform. We can't just feed just while we're at a rodeo. They get fed 365 days a year, and they get plenty of grain and plenty of hay every single day, whether they're working or not. And that's an important factor. The vet bills, and the meds. And we do a lot of our own vetting and stuff here, of course, but it's still very, very expensive to do.
And I was just talking to feed bill because I don't count nothing else, but I make my own hay.
Yeah.
And it's expensive to keep 100 head fed and going.
Oh my goodness.
It,
and like you feeding in upstate New York, feeding on the outskirts of Chicago, the Windy City, wintertime, they consume a lot of feed, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah. And when I bought this place, I was lucky enough to find a farm after looking at 50 others before it, that I found a place that has a nice little horse barn attached to a really nice indoor and pastures right off of it. So it has worked really well. But I think when it's really bad out, I just bring them in and it's actually probably more for me than for them, but I can grain them and everything in their indoor and then turn them back out in the pastures and take feed out or take hay out there. But yeah, we had some days this winter that were, 20 below. And I think the worst thing we had this year is, I don't know what happened to the wind in town, but it became crazy here. We had several days where we had 40, 50 mile an hour winds.
Yeah.
And, so it's been a real challenge during the winter the last 2 years. And usually we don't get that here. So it's made things a whole lot tougher on this time.
It makes everything hard in the wintertime, keeping water running and dealing with frozen ground and gates stuck in the ground and all that sort of thing. So this year, 2024, of course, marks your 104th year in professional rodeo. And you are, I read this, you are the longest running stock contracting company in the International Professional Rodeo Association, over 60 years.
67 this year. Basically, Mito and my dad were at the meeting in Chicago, which is where the IPRA was founded. So, and it was founded in this region because this was, our stronghold for rodeos. And for many years, all of the best, biggest, most expensive, or bigger added money rodeos in the IPRA came from this area of the country. And I think that has lent itself to, and my family's been extremely loyal in terms of they liked all the precedents that the IPRA set, whether it was women in rodeo and different events and taking barrel racing as one of our standard events and all of that, the breakaway rope. And throughout the years, those innovations have been really the foundation of what the IPRA has been all about. And that's the part of it that my family believed in so strongly. So when Dad and Mito went there, it was, part of the reason was that there was a problem with some promoters not paying things correctly and stuff like that. But when they all got together, they knew that they wanted an association that wasn't just about the cowboys or just about the producers, but that everybody in rodeo was represented equally. And that has been the mainstay of the IPRA and certainly the mainstay of my family's involvement.
Well, that's excellent, and thank you for that. That's great learning for us. Yeah, we are very interested in those foundation years that you just described, and I haven't heard anybody that's described it as well as you have, what the intent was in founding the IRA, the International Rodeo Association. Yep. And your region that you work in, you do a lot in Illinois. I see Wisconsin, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri. So you get out and you travel a bit. And before the call, you told us that last year you did a rodeo clear on the western side of Iowa up against the Missouri River.
I wish you wouldn't remind my crew because they're still threatening to mutiny for that one. But yeah, it was funny because this elderly gentleman called me and asked about a rodeo out in western Iowa. And I tried to kind of politely say, look, why don't I get you some names for people that might be closer for you? And, I'm sure they could save you some money and they do a great job and all of that. And he said, well, okay, but would you send me a package? So I did.
Yeah.
And I really did it kind of to placate him more than actually get the rodeo. I will learn not to do that anymore. But then, so I didn't hear from him for quite some time. So I thought, okay, just move on. And then another gentleman from the same group called and said, well, we want to book the rodeo. And I'm like, oh, no, not now. And Sam, I'm sure you've had those. Like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And so, I felt honor bound that I had to do it. So we did, but it was 500 and some miles away. And the people were lovely to work with and all of that. But it's not a trip that anybody's going to want to make again real soon. But and a lot of our issues, first of all, we have all, portable pens and stuff. There is no portable arena or no permanent arenas left around here anymore. Mm-hmm. The closest is about 250 miles away. And they're just, we have to set up and tear down everything, which means hauling semis. And then you've got all the livestock and everything else. Plus we have the novelty trailer and all of that has to go. It's just a lot to take with us. So we have really tried to keep it closer to home, especially the last few years. And the older I get, the closer I'd like to stay to home.
Yeah.
So, and Justin is definitely on the let's stay close to home crew.
Yeah.
So we try to do that. And right now we've got a rodeo up by Green Bay that's, it's like a 4 or 5 hour drive, which isn't so bad. And then we go down to by St. Louis for a baseball field rodeo in October, which is terrific.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's like a 6 hour drive.
Okay.
And if I could stay in those parameters, that keeps everything working more easily and certainly keeps the crew and the livestock and stuff a lot happier. We're not putting a lot of road miles on anything or a lot of road hours on anything at any one time.
And what I found out is I kind of get stupid in January and February when you're feeding this stuff and flat broke and, I could do that. And then come July, why the hell did you ever think of doing something like that?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I said, Sam.
Yeah.
Exactly what I said.
Yeah.
And it happened in January. I can tell you that for sure.
And I used to double book quite often.
Really? Okay.
2 a week. And
Yeah.
that was ludicrous. Your crew's wiped out. You're wiped out. You can't do justice to everybody, and I got down to where there was one that changed weeks every 5 years, and that was the only one I doubled up on every 5th year. It was just so tough on everybody, and you think, I'm going to double the money. Well, it doesn't happen that way.
And this year I had an interesting thing happen because, we've had a couple of stock contractors go out of business, and it was interesting because all of a sudden in January, I get phone calls from like 11 committees that want to have packages for their rodeos. But it was more interesting because they were all like one performance rodeos and all at fairs, and they were all spread out all over the place. And so I kind of looked around and thought, there's no way, because I will kill the crew, I'll kill stock, I'll kill equipment, and we're not going to just be running from state to state back and forth. And I know there's other companies that have done that and they seem to like it, but maybe I'm just too old for that. But I didn't think that was a good idea. But about the beginning or end of February, I thought, I just turned down 11 rodeos. Am I out of my mind? But I really don't think that we probably would have come home with any profit by the time you got done with running back and forth and replacing things and breaking downs and, all the other stuff that's going to happen. But it made you stop and think. And certainly sound better in January than they do in June.
Yep. And I quit doing one performance rodeos.
Yeah.
It was just. It just wasn't financially. You priced them almost as much as 2, but when you're at midnight, you start tearing down and everybody's whipped, and it just didn't make sense. Now, I'm not saying I didn't do some if I had, on the way where I had a day.
Right.
But, I think at the end I did 2 one-performance rodeos.
Exactly. And we won't do any more of them. I've got 2, one we've done for 40-some years, and they're both within 50 miles of home.
Oh, wow.
And they're spread out. They're in the middle of the week. Okay, fine. Mm-hmm. Those 2 are, but every other one, if they don't go 2, we just can't do it anymore. It's gotten crazy financially. The other thing is, good help is hard to find, and you can't kill them.
Yeah.
It just doesn't pay in the long run, and so we can't do them either.
So 2024, I see that it's the all-in tour.
Mm-hmm.
Talk
Yes,
to
sir.
us about what that means.
Okay, so I think the all-in thing came up because we are certainly, as a family and as a company, all in on continuing to grow and do things the way maybe some other people wouldn't want to do, but we're self-producing more rodeos now. We rent the grounds or the venue wherever we're at. We do the sponsors, we do the tickets, we do the rodeo, all of that.
I see.
And it's wonderful if you have great weather and, the things sell out. And we've had remarkable success with spectators around here. And part of it's the region we're in. People don't get to see rodeos all the time. But our customers are a little different. They want to be entertained. And they're probably a lot more like yours, Sam, in that they don't want to watch 12 hours of team roping or 5 hours of bull riding. They want a show. And so the glitz, the music, the color, the variety of events and stuff like that, those are the things that are important to them. So that's what we've really tried to focus on. And particularly our self-produced rodeos, you get good weather, we knock it out of the park. Of course, we're also on the hook if it pours rain or you don't do a good job,
right?
For whatever reason. So basically, we've set up this tour we've increased added money at all the rodeos. We have added some great bonuses. Like this year, there's an extra $1,500 bonus for whatever cowboy makes the most money during the tour in one event or multiple events. And then the same thing for whatever cowgirl makes the most money during that tour. The only provisions on it are that they have to either be a member of the IPRA or the Mid-States Rodeo Association, because we co-sanction the rodeos with them now, and they have to make 6 out of the 8 rodeos. Other than that, there are no rules or provisions that they have to qualify for. And we've got trophy saddles for some of the events. We've got Cactus Ropes has stepped up with some great gift certificates for all the roping winners. Vetline Equine is one of the new sponsors, and they're actually providing a packet of their products to the winners of all the events at every tour rodeo, and then an additional package for all of the tour champs. And they're also giving one for, like, during the rodeo, the clown will pick out a spectator. Do you own horses, whatever, and put another package out there for them. And so that's worked out really, really well. And we're hoping that with increased added money and the bonuses and awards and stuff like that, that we can continue to increase the contestant numbers as well.
Okay. And how can these contestants, these rodeo cowboys and cowgirls, how can they find information on this tour?
Okay, so everything, as a matter of fact, this morning, while it was raining, I put a bunch of stuff up and shared it to all kinds of Facebook groups, but BigHatRodeo.com always has all the information on it, as well as Big Hat Rodeo Facebook and Instagram and, all the other ones. They're up there. But BigHatRodeo.com is our website, and we have all the tour schedule stuff up there, as well as all of the information on the awards is also up there. The IPRA website and Mid-States Rodeo Association websites will also have all of the tour information up. I know Mid-States went up last week. I believe the IPRA's has gone up once, and it'll continue to go up. When they go to Next Gen or to Central Entry to enter the rodeos, they will find on our listings the tour information as well, and it will give not only the names and everything and any contact information they need as well. Hopefully, we also have a MailChimp program that will go out to all the contestants this coming week. For all contestants who have competed at our rodeos for the last 5 years, we'll also get an email and a text about the tour, the dates, the added money, the awards. All of that will be available to all of that this coming week.
Okay, perfect. And you're getting ready to kick off next weekend, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 2 weeks, I guess, the 2024 Bronc Riding Clinic. Kenneth Glick is coming in. Talk a little bit about that event.
It's a really, really good weekend. We get a kind of a wide variety of people that enter. Last year we had Stetson Bierman and Stephen Grafen came up to teach, and they're both Illinois contestants, so that was great. And they're top 15 guys in the IPRA. They're doing well in the PRCA, and they're just really, really good guys. And we had a variety of kids from 2 young brothers who have been coming to our schools for a couple of years now, and also enter every single one of our rodeos in the novice bronc riding right now. And slowly but surely, they're moving over to the open side a little bit more. Then we've got guys that have never been on a horse before. We've got guys who actually, one of the kids who was in the bareback riding top 15, Blaine Houston from Michigan, is a great kid and really good bareback rider. And he's getting more and more into bronc riding. He was with us last year at the school. And so we've had quite a variety of people come. And this year it's the same kind of thing. Kenneth is going to be a great instructor, and we have some other people helping him as well from around here. And it's at my nephew Justin's place. Great indoor arena. It's really nicely set up. Good buck and shoots, great pickup men. And then we don't just, it's not just to try all the great horses. We bring horses that are definitely matched to the kids or the students' level. So, and we actually have a ranch bronc riding girl coming this year.
Oh,
so,
wow. Okay.
yeah, so that ought to be fun. So I've got a couple of really solid broncs that'll stand in the chutes, and, you know, they won't wiggle an ear all the time. She needs to get on and learn as much as she can. They're going to buck her off, but I think the best thing is they're going to give her an honest chance at learning correctly, you know, balance and chute procedures and, you know, trying to get riding skills down and how to get off, you know, and how to land and, you know, how to get away and stuff like that, all which are really, really important, especially if they're young and inexperienced. And then we have several bareback riders coming. So it's kind of a big mix of people. But I think we are very well matched with people of all different levels. So we bring horses of all different kinds and shapes and talent levels. And as the guys get on as many horses as they want in 2 days, usually I haven't seen them want to get on more than 2 or 3, but we've got these 2 brothers now, and they'll get on 3 or 4 apiece.
Oh, okay.
And they are so resilient, and they can hit the ground hard, and they jump back right up. It kind of reminds me of the Mike and Sam show from before, because, you know, they would get on everything.
Youth is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it really is. And so we do that, and we have lunch for them there, and they're there 2 solid days, and then they head off. The nice thing is that a lot of them come back and enter the novice events at our rodeos. So we have novice bareback riding, bronc riding, and bull riding at every single rodeo.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
And
same thing.
May 4th and 5th in Bristol, Wisconsin. Do you still have some open slots?
I think we have 1 left in the bareback riding. There might be 1 in the bronc riding, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll have to look that up. But I do know there is a bareback riding slot open.
Okay, perfect. And then June 7th, kickoff, Sunny Acres Farm, Pro Rodeo and Bull Riding.
Cool place. It's an 1800s farm right outside of Chicago that was owned by the same family for over 120 years. A new family bought it about 5 years ago, and they have built it into an extraordinary, fun family entertainment center. They just opened a wedding center, of all things, right on the property. These 120-year-old trees surround it, 120-year-old farm buildings that have been completely renovated, and we stuck a rodeo smack dab in the middle of all these buildings. And they have carnival rides on one side that are like vintage carnival rides. And they have, you know, stores and stuff like that for all kinds of farm products and plants and, you know, vegetables and all of that. And at the same time, they put on a fabulous rodeo. Last year they added $10,000 for their first one. This year they're adding 14.
Wow.
And packed crowds.
Okay.
The 7th and 8th are regular rodeo performances. The 9th is a regular rodeo performance, but no tickets are sold to spectators. It is a sold-out private event for sponsors.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and they had the same thing on Friday night last year, and they just flipped it and moved it to Sunday this year. But it's a marvelous facility and some of the nicest people to work with that you could ever ask for. We've just had a blast going there, and to see their first rodeo be so packed, they were completely sold out. But and to have that happen at a first rodeo is just so much fun to be involved with.
Okay. And for fans to get tickets to that rodeo or the Great Chicagoland Pro Rodeo and Bull Riding later in June and on, how can they find tickets for these events?
Okay, so our 3 self-produced rodeos are all the tickets you buy right through bighatrodeo.com. But if they go to our website, there is a link for every rodeo's ticket sales. Like Sunny Acres, you can go to Sunny Acres Farm, or you can go to Pixar.com, and the tickets are there. But if you go to Big Hat, they'll have a link to that ticket site for all the rodeos all the way through. Most of our rodeos have general admission seats. They have premium seating options. Sunny Acres does have premium seating. All of our 3 self-produced ones do, as well as the Gateway Grizzlies Rodeo in October near St. Louis. That is a huge baseball field that there's a time-lapse video of turning the place from a baseball stadium to a rodeo arena. And coolest thing ever. Great people to work with. Awesome rodeo. And it was funny because all the time we were there, we watched cowboys walk in and out of that place, ride their horses in, and they weren't looking at their cattle. They were taking pictures of the place, of the scoreboard, of the places they had to mark off and keep horses off because there's a $1 million French drain under this baseball field.
Wow.
Things like that. But it was so much fun to be there. And their tickets, there's also a link on our site to their tickets as well.
Okay, perfect. We've covered a lot of ground today, Lenore. I guess one of my final questions is, what's the future looking like for Big Hat Rodeo Company? This year, 104 years. I'm hearing a 6th generation. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I think we're so blessed with the whole thing. And I think that one of the important things for us is my job, I think, is to make sure that Big Hat is viable, ready, and growing for Justin and to continue. And that is certainly the plan. He is a marvelous man, and him and his wife just welcomed 5-month-old Gracie Lou to our 6th generation. And we have an 11-year-old named Gunner as well in that generation. And so we have great hopes that it continue at least for one more generation, but hopefully either Gracie or Gunner will think that rodeo might be what they want to do in their future as well. If it is, great. If it's not, well, if we can survive 6 generations, I think we've done our job.
You bet, you bet. And Gunner, 11 years old, as you said, he's riding horses and involved?
Yeah, he hasn't been involved in rodeo so much the last couple of years because he's a big baseball fan, big hunting advocate, and he has all kinds of activities, of course. But he's still very involved with stuff. I think he's showing cattle and stuff now as well.
Oh, okay.
So, and he's a typical little boy, wants to play and have lots of fun. And Gracie is going to be the most spoiled little cowgirl on the planet.
Yeah.
I can tell you that her aunts are all in about buying girly stuff.
Okay.
So,
okay. All in. That's the name of the 2024 tour.
Absolutely. And I think that's really our attitude going forward. We want to, this certainly is our plan to continue and to keep growing rodeos and probably doing more and more self-produced events. But certainly we love our host committee rodeos as well. And the more cowboys, the more spectators we can attract, the better we like it.
Perfect, perfect. Absolutely. So with all the livestock and everything that you have, Lenore, Big Hat Rodeo Company, you've got riding horses, pickup horses, trick riding horses, all kinds of using horses, bucking horses, bulls. Our sponsor is Parasite Systems, and they have a parasitic diagnostic system that veterinaries use. It's a medical device that they place for the pasture animals, horses, cattle, goats, sheep, and chickens. And Sam actually tested 4 horses.
Yeah, we tested 4 of them and got the results, and it was pretty interesting what they told us to do.
And of the 2 horses you tested, I did see the counts come back in, and it's eggs per gram. And you had 2 horses that were below the need to treat.
Yeah, they said don't treat them, actually. Those 2 were good. They're under 200 grams. And so if you did treat them, that wouldn't be cost effective, of course, but it also would hurt the resistance.
Builds resistance.
Yeah, builds
Absolutely.
resistance. So, and the other 2 horses were very high.
High shitters.
Yeah, so we got what to treat them with, and the vets told us, and it was over the counter.
The
And,
meds that you could treat with.
right. And the biggest thing I learned out of the whole thing, that the biggest thing was, you always think, okay, or worm after the first freeze. in the fall, and then in the spring, of course, thinking, okay, it kills all the worms that they get out of their system. Well, in talking to these people, they said actually the heat and the dry kills more worms than the cold. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting because, that's what you've learned your whole life, and you think you're doing things right, and you might not be.
Right, right. So the two high shedders, Lenore, they were like over 1,000 eggs per gram. That isn't terrible. It's nothing like that. That just says they put a lot of larvae out on the ground, which means the other horses can ingest them as they're eating grass and that sort of thing. So they recommended treat the two high shedders, retest in 14 days. Let's see how good the wormer was that you used. And then they're saying we can go from there, and you start to manage your pastures a little bit. Let the pastures, if the high shedders are in them, keep them away from the other horses that had good counts. And they're saying through just a little bit of work over a year or so that one can move towards eradication of the worm completely from the herd.
Wow.
My daughter has 5 horses. 2 horses, the same thing. 200 eggs or less per gram. They say, leave them alone. Don't treat them. You are fine. She had one that was in like the 300 to 400 range. They're saying, okay, that's a moderate shedder. Certainly we want to treat, but we don't need to test because we're going to be successful with that kind of a count. But then she had 2 yearlings. And they said that's not unusual to have high shedders as yearlings because the immune system and everything isn't just built yet.
Right.
Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them, but they said we do want to treat them now based on the counts. And they had strongyles, and they were over 1,000 eggs per gram, and she has treated based on what the vet says to treat them with, and then gone back and retested, and so she's getting that program underway. So that's what we're learning as we go through it. And Parasite Systems, you can check them out, parasitesystems.com. And for these mail-in kits, you can actually go online and request them through BTC, Beyond the Chutes. There's a coupon for 50% off these testing kits. BTC023. Just go online, and it's a super easy process. They're going to send you a kit. You go out and pick up the poo. You put it in a small container with a freezer pack. Put it in the bag that they bring with it. Put a label on it. Ship it off to them, and they email you the results in like 2 or 3 days. So
That's kind of cool.
yeah.
I could think one of our vets would be very interested in learning more just for having stuff available at his clinic.
You bet. And one cool thing about it, as you bring that up, Parasite Systems, they're in Lexington, Kentucky, and they have just come out with a brand new medical device that is what they call the all-in-one. Now they can also test dogs and cats. They test for worms, they test for coccidia, they test for giardia, all things that can be passed on to children if your dogs are carrying it. So these vet clinics is who we're trying to get the word out to as well, Lenore.
Well, I think that's a great idea. But it's Parasite Systems.
Yep, Parasite Systems, Parasight, as in C.
Okay, that's why I got that.
Okay. Parasite, great that you're trying to Google it and find it.
Yeah, and I kept saying it wasn't coming up, and I'm like, okay, well, there's got to be a reason.
Yeah. Parasite, sight like I can see. Parasite, SIGHT, and they're saying let's test first. Let's treat as required. Let's not spend any crazy money, and certainly let's not build resistance in our animals.
Pull right up.
Good, excellent.
And you having the Bronx, and like I did, it's a tough job to worm.
Yeah.
When you run 100 head in there and start worming, it's an all-day affair, and it's tough. You don't want to do it more than you do or give them the wrong things. But I got in the habit of using what I thought was the best wormer for the money. And, well, I'll do it again because, and it wasn't the cheapest, but I thought I was doing the right thing. And I was doing it completely wrong. And it had a little tube, so it's easier with them Bronx. Some of them ones you got the big fat tube and you stick in their mouth and they bite it. And, and there's another $10 wasted because you can't get it in them. So,
And one thing, Lenore, for like your big herds, let's say you got 30 broncs out in a pasture, they don't want to test each one. They know that's not cost effective. But if this herd is always together, you can pull kind of a cross sample across from as many piles as you can get, and then send that in, and then that at least tells you what are you looking at. Okay? Is it
Well, and
strong
that's-
giles? Yeah.
That was what I was going to ask. I'm like, okay, you realize that I'm not going to follow through the pasture and watch everybody poop and,
Well,
pick up 30
well,
different samples.
You may have
But
to.
that makes sense.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. And that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And we'll get you connected. I got to tell you, Lenore, I am tickled that you agreed to be on our show. Thank you, Marlon Harris, for recommending we give you a call. 104 years of rodeo, Big Hat Rodeo Company, all in tour 2024. I'm impressed.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. I really do appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure and just a blast talking to Sam again as well.
good to hear from you. Tell your family I said hello.
You too.
And to our listeners, we hope that you enjoyed this episode of our podcast with Big Hat Rodeo Company's Lenore Calzavera. If you do, please share it with your friends. We can't say enough that word of mouth gets us more good than just about anything else you can do. Help them find it on Spotify or Apple Podcast, YouTube. We are out there, so the best thing to do, help us spread the word, because great stories like 104 years of rodeo with Big Hat Rodeo Company. Who doesn't need to learn about this great rodeo company? So, reminder, check out our Beyond the Chutes Facebook page and follow us. And again, thank you to Parasite System for their support. And remember, we have that coupon code BTC023, 50% all your testing. Let them know that you got performance horses. Let them know what you're doing. And remember this, as we talked, all these big miles you are driving, those horses in the trailer, they are riding. So stresses are what it's all about as we get into this big rodeo season. Let's eliminate one of these stresses as we can and help get the right treatment. And let's do it right by testing, then treating. And to our listeners, this is Beyond the Chute with
Sam Swearingen.
and
Lenore Calzavera.
until next time, this is Doug Simcox. Thank you for listening.